Have you ever stopped to think about how something that happened centuries ago on a totally different continent could actually shape the country you're living in right now? Well, in this explainer, we're going to trace some of those surprising, powerful lines that connect European history directly to the story of modern India. Okay, let's get into it.
So, our story really kicks off with two huge global shifts that happened almost at the same time. You can think of them like two giant engines firing up, setting the entire world off on a completely new track. One was a revolution of ideas, and the other, a revolution of machines.
And that brings us to the big question we're tackling today. I mean, it sounds a little weird, right? How on earth could a revolutionary slogan from France and an engine built in Britain have anything to do with the future of India? Well, as we're about to see, the connection is way more direct than you might think.
So let's break down these two world-changing sparks. On one side, you've got the ideological spark, the French Revolution in 1789. This wasn't just about storming a prison. It completely rewired how people thought about their rights, their government, and where power actually comes from. Then, on the other side, you have the technological spark, Britain's Industrial Revolution. This didn't just give us new gadgets. It fundamentally changed how we live, how we work, how we build entire economies.
Let's stick with the ideas for a second. Liberty, equality, fraternity. This was way more than just a catchy phrase. It was absolutely electrifying. The idea that power belongs to the people, not to a king by divine right, that was radical. And an idea that powerful, well, there's no way it was going to stay just within the borders of France.
And that's because these ideas gave birth to a brand new, powerful concept, the modern nation-state. Suddenly, people started seeing themselves not just as subjects of some distant monarch, but as citizens of a nation with a shared identity.
And the political engine driving all this was something called liberal nationalism. The demands it made were just revolutionary for the time. A government that had to follow a constitution, a free press that could actually criticize that government, and laws that treated everyone the same. This was basically the instruction manual for building a whole new kind of country.
And you know what? This instruction manual got used all over Europe. For centuries, places like Germany and Italy were really just a patchwork of little kingdoms and states. But fueled by this fire of nationalism, leaders like Bismarck in Germany and Cavour in Italy pulled these regions together to create the unified countries that we know today.
All right, now let's pivot to that other spark, the revolution of machines. So while Europe was redrawing its political maps, Britain was busy redrawing the world's economic map. This was the industrial age, and it was incredibly hungry.
Now here's where it gets really crucial for our story. This slide lays out the chain reaction perfectly. So step 1, Britain's new factories are churning out goods like never before, and they need two things: a ton of raw materials like cotton and new places to sell all the stuff they're making. Step 2, colonialism was the perfect solution. India becomes the captive supplier of those raw materials and the captive market for those finished goods. Which leads to the really critical part, step 3. This new system absolutely devastated India's own traditional industries, like its world-famous handloom weaving.
And the piece of technology powering this whole global operation? The steam engine. James Watt's incredible invention wasn't just running the factories back in Britain. It was also powering the trains and steamships that could go deep into India to get raw materials out and push finished British textiles back in. It was quite literally the engine of both industry and empire.
But of course, history is never a one-way street. The very things that Britain brought to India, the economic disruption, but also those European ideas about nationalism, well, they eventually sparked an incredible reaction. India began to use the master's tools to dismantle the master's house.
And the fight for freedom wasn't just one single event. It was a long, organized struggle that built up momentum over decades. You see it starting formally with the Indian National Congress in 1885, and then it just explodes with these massive, nationwide movements that brought millions of people together, from the non-cooperation movement to the famous Dandi March, all the way to that final, decisive push for independence.
And right at the peak of that struggle, you get this incredibly powerful, no-turning-back call to action from Mahatma Gandhi in 1942, do or die. What he was saying was, the time for talking is over. The demand is simple: complete independence right now.
And here's a beautiful piece of historical irony for you. Another European invention, Gutenberg's printing press from way back in the 1400s, actually became one of the most powerful weapons in India's freedom struggle. It was used to print newspapers and pamphlets that spread nationalist ideas, calls for self-reliance, and messages of reform to every single corner of the subcontinent. It helped unite millions of people behind one common cause.
So let's zoom back out. How does all this fit together? Well, these threads, revolution, industry, colonialism, nationalism, they didn't just stop in 1947 with India's independence. They kept weaving together, and they created the very fabric of the modern, interconnected world we all live in today.
So really, when we talk about globalization, what we're actually talking about is the end result of all these historical forces. The global supply chains we rely on, the way information zips around the planet, our interconnected economies, it all has deep roots in the story we've just been walking through.
For India, a really pivotal moment in this modern, globalized story came in 1991. The country was facing a major economic crisis, and it responded by launching these huge, sweeping reforms. This was the moment India essentially opened its economy to the rest of the world, setting the stage for decades of incredible growth and plugging it right into that global system.
Now, it's really easy to get lost in these giant, sweeping stories that span the globe. But we have to remember, history isn't just something that happens out there, to the world. It's something that happens to real people in very specific places.
Exactly. For all this talk about massive global shifts, the real impact is always felt right there, on the ground. So, to make this idea really concrete, let's zoom in from the world map to a regional one, and take a quick look at how these forces played out in a place like Assam. And here's the key thing to get. Assam's history did not start when the British showed up. Not even close. It has its own deep, rich timeline, stretching all the way back to the Ahom Kingdom in 1228, with legendary moments like the Battle of Saraighat. So when that global wave of nationalism finally reached India, it didn't just wash over a blank slate. It collided and mixed with this already existing history, producing its own local heroes like Maniram Dewan and Piali Barua during the 1857 revolt. It's the perfect example of how global forces meet, but they don't erase local identity.
And that really brings us to our final thought. Every single town, every city, every region has a story. And that story is both totally unique to that place, and at the same time, it's connected to these much larger global forces we've been talking about. So the real question to leave you with is this: what global stories are hiding in your own local history?